There we are.
Fast street.
The October 17th, 2006 meeting of the Tree Commission is now open, and we have 9, well, at least 8 and possibly 9 items on our agenda tonight. The first is a tree permit request from a resident, Ron Kemplin, who has property at 10 North Lancaster, and he's requesting the removal of a box elder at that site. And you may have overheard the discussion. There are actually 2 different kinds of trees close to each other. There's a box elder and there's a hackberry behind it. And the box elder, he has been having difficulties for the past year with box elder beetles at the house. The box elder's actually in the right-of-way on the neighboring property at 14 North Lancaster, but the box elder beetles come visit 10 North Lancaster, and have done this this past April, and he sprayed, and he had a request at that time to have the tree removed, he and the contiguous property owner. And then the urban forester looked at the site, said that the problem with box elder beetles was cyclical, and that removing the box elder would not necessarily remove the box elder beetles. So we did not permit removal of the box elder. The problem occurred again this fall, and there was a very heavy infestation of the beetles, and Mr. Kemplin did another series of applications of insecticide, but it was really not until cold weather, I think, that the box elder beetles finally went away. But he's still interested in, and would like to have permission to remove the box elder and do it at his expense, and to replace the box elder with something that is not attractive to box elder beetles. Ann Bonner looked at it a second time for us and said that if indeed the tree were removed, she had some suggestions of things to plant in the site that might be better. We also asked Rory Lewandowski, who is the Ohio State University Athens County Cooperative Extension Agent, to weigh in on this, and he consulted Dr. David Shetlar, who is called the Bug Doc at OSU, and has done some research on box elders. And he, the OSU specialist, said that removing box elders actually is an option, although it doesn't necessarily get rid of the box elder beetles right away, but removing their food is an option. He also provided some other insecticide suggestions. And let's see, let's find from Dr. David Shetler, if box elder trees are nearby, their removal is an option. So it appears that that is a possibility for this site. And this is an opportunity to trade in a Dodge Neon and get a Buick, more or less, if we get a better tree arrangement. So
is that the one you were saying that there was a hackberry behind it?
Mm-hmm.
So how far behind it?
About
Less
3 feet.
About 3 feet at the most. It's
Yeah.
very close.
So we really wouldn't want to plant something that close.
No, she suggests moving into the front of the yard and doing a smaller tree. I'm sorry, I didn't do a very good summary here.
No, that's okay.
Not to read. I'm having trouble seeing. Okay. This is, she suggests, I would recommend that the hackberry remain and the replacement tree be planted over a bit more in front of the house for adequate space over time. The planting might also be a bit of a challenge in that the site slopes down from the street toward the house. Due to the potential for vandalism, I would recommend that the replacement tree be staked and fenced, protected. She suggests sawtooth oak, shingle oak, saucer magnolia, or perhaps multi-stem serviceberry could survive there if protected from vandalism. depending on the wishes of the property owner and the look that's desired. These are all smaller stature trees that wouldn't conflict with the surrounding infrastructure. And so that's Ann's suggestion.
And I take it there are no other box elder trees in the close vicinity.
This is the only box elder around, at that site. He's lucky that way.
Do we know what the bugs look like? Are they large and scary, or are they small? And
Oh, I'm
they're
sorry.
more like the ladybug?
They're about the size of a lightning bug.
Oh, okay, right.
Red and orange.
Red, yeah. But they're real prolific, and they love light-colored buildings, and they'll just get all over it.
They'll just
what color
cover it.
the building is.
Tan,
Yeah.
Tan,
beige.
yeah.
Well,
They'll cover it.
They get in, just like lady beetles, they go in windows and any nook or cranny that's open.
I think that since the hackberry is a much more desirable street tree, that we let him go ahead and cut down the box elder.
But keep the hackberry.
Keep the
hackberry,
hackberry,
and then
yes.
put in another more desirable tree.
Oh,
Which is what they're proposing, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
I think it's kind of not our usual feel, like to take down a healthy tree. But on the other hand, having those trees there that close together is not a great situation.
No.
So
Right.
this, I think, is an opportunity to give
The hackberry a better chance.
the hackberry a extended life.
We have been talking about getting away from so many maples because of the possibility of disease that we're seeing with the ashes. And I think that hackberry would be a good tree to try using as a street tree. We could see how it does in this spot. But it's a pretty tough tree.
Yeah, and it is. Ron, Kemplin, would you like to say anything about? Yes, please.
I use hackberry in strip line reclamation.
Yeah.
Thank you for hearing the permit again. We appreciate that very much. I really don't want to be here. And I do love trees. I think it's a gift from God and for all of us to enjoy. And I hate to see any tree removed, but this particular tree is a nuisance. It has cost me personally a lot of money trying to eradicate, exterminate the beetle that has infested my property. It's a student rental. I got calls from some of the girls that were living there last year, and they were saying that the beetles were crawling on their bed. They were even getting on them at night, and I tried to assure them that they were harmless. But it's hard to tell a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old person that they're harmless. And
Had real Athens
I
experience.
had professional extermination come twice last year. And even after that, I went up there at least once a week, and I would spray myself around the house. They seemed to get in the ground, and I thought maybe by spraying the ground around the house, the foundation, it would help eliminate and reduce. This year, actually this week, the base of the tree, up about 12 inches, was probably red and black, all the way up at least 12 inches up. Then there were clusters all over the tree, also of this box elder beetle. My problem is I don't mind them being on the tree. I just don't want them in my house.
Yeah.
And they do attack the house. I've been up there spraying, and I've had to go all the way up to the third floor on a ladder and spray underneath the eaves and around the windows, in the window sills, on the roof, in the gutters, everywhere really.
Ron, I
the
think
whole
we're going
house.
to let you do this.
And
I think you sold it.
it just, they're a nuisance. The tree's pretty. It provides shade and all that. It kind of hangs over up the street and will probably eventually need to be replaced or removed anyway, because it does hang over the street about 8 or 10 feet. But I would appreciate anything you can do to help me alleviate this matter. I can understand the students. I wouldn't want to be in the house, with bugs crawling around also. And, the insecticide that I'm using, I have no idea of any effect that it may have, on the human body. It's been on me and I'm still alive, so.
And you got down off the ladder, too. So
But I worry about
this
that.
is a worrisome
So
thought.
we're just asking for help in this situation, and we appreciate it.
I think the commission, do I get the sense that everybody's willing to have the tree go? And you said that you would plant another tree in its place. We will give you Ann's recommendations, and we would ask that you use a good nursery, a local nursery, and get a tree that's about an inch and a half caliper and root ball and plant it with
It
out
would
in
be
front
more
with-
economical for me in the long run to do that than what I'm doing presently.
And the fall is the time.
Yeah, this is a good moment to
Once the
do
trees
it.
become dormant.
Okay.
That's the-
Well, I think, we will sign off on the tree permit, and you'll have permission to remove the box elder, but the hackberry, you're very lucky you've got something unusual like that behind it.
You can get, just in writing, give me some information as to what you want me to do.
Okay, we will
And,
give you
we
Ann's
will-
instructions.
We will do it. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Thank you for coming. Sorry to put you through that. I always hated that podium when I was behind it. Well, okay. Our next item on the agenda is the landscape ordinance and the issues they're under. And we have Applebee's. Mr. Knoll is here with the Applebee's plan. And we had, possibly thanks to the sagas of Frognet, some interesting lack of communication about things after our last meeting. There were some concerns that we had about some of the things that were being proposed for the planting, and that was in particular, let's see, the Bradford pears that were up against the building, which were are very tight and break after a certain age. Those struck us as maybe in a bad place, and there were some other concerns about the perimeters. Did you finally receive that communication?
Yes, yes, and I met with the regional Applebee's, with the regional Applebee's representative today, got their approval to go ahead with the revisions that you had recommended, one of going in and alternating the maples with the linden. And so we've shown that on the drawings. We've changed the Bradford pear to a Cleveland Select. With that, I personally have had Bradford pears in my yards in other homes and know exactly your recommendations on that. I've actually seen trees fall apart in high winds and highway areas and nail trucks and cars and stuff, so they're not a good tree when they get older. And then I think the other was the issue of, yes, the magnolias would be a tree form, not a bush form, and would be trimmed up so that they would have the appearance of a tree with those. And I think the last item was changing to a Coleri aristocrat over the other Coleri pear, I think it was.
I think Cleveland Select would be an acceptable one.
Okay. We had a variety. It was the second island back, coming back, which is, I think we had just a
Yeah,
couple out on
that
the
is-
street of those. There was one in the front.
Okay, the CP.
Between, yeah, there, and then there was one down here in
CP.
this island. Yeah, so there were of those, which we changed to the Pyrus Colerian aristocrat, which was, I think, another variety of that then. So,
Okay. And the site also has some trees that, there was a sweet gum that Emily asked about that.
yes. Applebee's is really concerned about trees that bear any kind of seeds or pods. Apparently, their experience has been with people falling and lawsuits ascending because of those. Even when we were talking about the Cleveland Select and looking into that, making sure it did not have a seed or something that could acquire that. Personally, I have a vendetta against the sweet gum.
You're not alone, there are many people
And
feel that
so
way.
I have no trouble taking that one down. It is where we will eventually locate the Applebee's signage is on that corner. And that tree is right there, and the two together won't work. That's why we changed to the
Right there.
Aristocrat there, so that the signage would be above it, and so it would be able to be seen with it then. So, there are 2 honey locusts also there, which are not in the greatest shape. A lot of dead limbs and trees on those, and we're showing those being taken out so they could be replaced with new trees at that point. Again, for the same scenario, high winds, trees falling on cars or people or something, and getting that a little safer in that particular corner of the building, because majority of the people will be parking in that corner because that's the closest to the entrance of the building. Then.
You've put more trees on this
Yeah.
perimeter too. They're close,
And
they're
we
on the
show
30-foot
property
centers,
lines.
are they not?
Yeah, we actually show the property lines this time in the parking spaces themselves. Actually, what you saw was a lack of some trees because they were the future plantings of the Holiday Inn Express. And so when we gave you original plans, it didn't show these down here because those are on the Holiday Inn Express property there.
What are the trees going in here? It's a,
Okay.
it's a QGP, and I'm looking upside down, so I can't
The
tell.
QGP,
I don't see it in the list, but as I say, I'm looking
Did we
upside
lose
down.
Quercus something.
It's probably Quercus something,
the
yeah.
QGP, we'll look on the Holiday Inn Express because
Some
on
kind
that
of oak.
particular-
Yeah.
No, it's not. It is the QPT.
Golden Raindrops Crab Apple? No, wait, that's the other one, sorry.
It is the Querius Green Pillar Oak.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is an oak.
Okay. Does that suggest a deciduous form?
Oh.
Is that which, I mean,
Sure, certainly.
they do well around here. I mean, it's not.
Where are they going to be?
They're on this island here.
The reason
I mean,
they
it's,
were there, my nursery consultant recommended those along here and there because they're more of a pillar tree. Because there'll be semi-trucks coming down this lane, because that is the entry into servicing both CVS and Applebee's as well as the Holiday Inn Express. We wanted to avoid any trees that might spread too much out over the roadway and have issues with the limbs and stuff with that. So that's why he recommended that particular tree in that case.
Back to the sweet gum here, I was hoping that that could be saved
Yeah.
originally, but after
That was your
seeing the
concern.
grading around it, I'm not sure it would do very
May
well
not
if
survive
you
it,
tried to
so,
save it
It
anyhow.
is, the grading there is a little strange because the main water line feeding all of the east end passes right through that area. And so
Oh.
we had to adjust the grades to accommodate that and not expose it any more than we had to. And so that's kind of why the grades are the way they are there. We felt that we didn't want to lose the water on the east side of Athens. That wouldn't be too good.
Alienate customers. Well, those were our recommendations.
Are we in a position now to see the entire site? Because one of the things we've been doing here, I think, is making compromises based on the fact that the next building's going to be able to accommodate the trees that might be missing from the first building. Now, where are we going?
The only place that we haven't finalized the design, as I indicated earlier, is those around the actual Oakville Bank itself area. And mainly because I just haven't had a chance to meet with the owner. They're not going to start their construction till March of next year. We've been so busy with the other 3 sites and fighting the weather, that we just haven't had time to determine exactly what trees. Of course, there will be trees in these areas It's just we haven't selected them yet.
No, that's
We
all
haven't
right.
worked out the landscaping yet.
Do you think that that represents the parking arrangements that are going to be in that? in
Yeah,
that
that
final
does
design?
represent, so there are trees here, trees there, a tree there, tree there, trees in these locations here and there, as well as there,
Yeah.
and as well as line.
So we won't be having trees between the two buildings, there's no room there, is there?
There's really no room
No.
here, no. Some landscaping areas, yes, to soften up that buffer there between the two. We do have the capability of a tree here, which also softens up that entry back in then with it. I've also talked CBS into some additional plantings, if I can borrow this. There is a trash compactor here that is fenced in, and a transformer sitting here, and I'm convinced then that this whole region needs to be landscaped, not pavement, because as the property owner over here, I really don't want to look at that fenced in.
And also,
dumpster.
the dumpster has to be landscaped
Yeah.
anyway, to some, I mean,
Exactly.
to the extent of
Yeah,
it.
and we're also landscaping around
Yeah.
this one here with landscape.
Is that the only dumpster that's going to be on these properties?
No, we do have one here, a small one that serves the bank. Applebee's is hidden behind here. It's a closed-in fenced area there with their landscaping all around that, if you're good at the landscaping then. And then the hotel's dumpster area, which is a brick wall construction, is located there with it. We are going to have some other trees located for the parks out into here. I've been talking with Kevin. Our goal is that as you are on this site, you can walk back into this area and use that area for recreation or for just walking around, since we do have quite a bit of employees working there and stuff. And that's,
And your clients are going to be paying for those
Yeah.
trees? Because, one of the concerns here was that how do we treat these four businesses? Should they be treated separately? If they should, there should be 8-foot buffers between each one and things like this.
Yeah,
And clearly
right.
the site doesn't allow for that, but if you can make some moves towards providing additional trees.
and that's our goal,
It's a good thing.
is to add that back into this area, so that create some interest for people who are staying at the hotel. They can walk back there and then on back to the Star Park, the volleyball areas, and in the bike path and stuff.
That's a tourism plus. It's nice.
Well, it's a good location because of the pool in the summertime next door. It's a lot of travelers who are coming in, which is the busiest time for the hotel. They'll be able to even walk and use the pool in the early evenings with their kids and stuff. And so it should be a very nice arrangement for people.
So,
They didn't put a gate along the original plan around that shelter house was to have a gate over on, what's the name of the road that goes
Park,
out?
East Park
East
Drive.
Park Drive.
I
Yeah,
thought there
I've
was gonna
talked
be-
to Kevin about that.
Yeah.
The shelter is about right here.
Uh-huh.
It's fenced across here,
Mhm.
and then the lot is here. We would like to, at our cost, of course,
Mhm.
develop
Good,
this
good.
with a gate there so
Yeah.
people could walk through there.
They can have picnics and, yeah, that would make it very nice. Excellent.
well,
So at this stage, what are we
Well,
what are we asking
What's
for?
the final approval on
Actually,
the-
Applebee's will be planting within the next 30 days.
so
As soon as we get the site straightened around enough and quit playing in the mud at this point. But they will be open in December, and they'll landscape yet this year. I would like to, because we are paving almost most of the lots for ease and convenience of construction of the hotel as well as the bank later. I would like to go ahead and get this planting area here in this year also, so that as people pull into Applebee's or come in this way to Applebee's, that this looks not as much of a construction site as possible with it, and that's my goal. And then to get these trees along back in here then, yet this fall, knowing of course that we get them in the fall, we have a better chance for them to survive
Yeah.
next summer. And I realize that when I'm done with my construction, we will have a drought. It's just inevitable.
balance the mud pit.
Since I need to get 4 buildings built yet this fall, I have a monsoon at this time. So,
And you do have 2 planting seasons to get the plantings done, but obviously we like to see where the plantings are going to be before
so,
everything
And that's why we went ahead and got the hotel drawings here also for you, so you
Okay.
can see what we're working on that. That is the planning schedule for that.
Gotta watch those mics.
That's how we keep the people in the
There's an extra copy you guys
staff
need.
awake.
Pretty much the plantings around the hotel is a continuation of the other sites. In the fact, the landscaping that we've shown along East Park Drive for the CVS, we will continue on down towards the City Lab Building. The plantings on the west side of Applebee's, we continue the same pattern back through there. The landscaping that exists here on Applebee's, although I see a tree missing. Another tree here. Then, which one there, in that corner.
On that
But-
corner there?
Yeah, on that corner there.
Oops, on the other bit.
With it. But continuing the next island back, continue the same pattern, so it looks like it's been rationally done. Some of the interesting things around the hotel is going to be that probably about 70% of the landscaping around the hotel is the landscaping that existed in front of the county engineers building. Some of the cherry trees and stuff
Yeah.
shown there we took out in the spring and have been maintaining those at Albany Nursery over the last summer. Many of the other plantings, the bulbs, we dug up all the bulbs and stuff, so a lot of that stuff will be put back around the hotel.
Were those cherry trees or sweet gum trees?
Well, I was told they were a cherry tree, I believe, not sweet gums, no.
Redbud.
Yes, redbuds, they're redbuds, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yes, they're redbuds.
Yeah, there's a redbud listed there.
Okay.
See,
Yes,
yeah,
there's-
there, and there,
I think on the two corners are also
Yes,
redbuds
there.
there.
and there. In terms of maintenance, each of these are separate property
Yes,
owners, are
they
they?
are.
So they will maintain the trees on their particular section?
Yes, they will.
Okay.
And all 4 sites are irrigated.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
wonderful.
Right. So the drought isn't so much of a concern.
Yes, it won't be, that's correct. Biggest concern we'll have is probably, not even this, because the irrigation will be in this and in the spring, so that if we do run into a situation in the summertime, we do have irrigation for the whole thing. Most of it will be probably drip, and other than where there's some grass areas, then we'll go to a spray top.
Well, that's one of the things we learned at the tree care conference was the more you can have trees share an extended piece of land rather than there being individual, the better the chances are for the trees. So much better situation for them. And most of these are pretty,
Those perimeters are good.
yeah.
What happens in this area here?
That's a dumpster pad there.
Because I don't see how you get into those parking spaces.
Well, it's a concrete pad is what it is. but
Oh.
So the,
Dumpster trucks are notorious for eating
oh,
up
I see, so
parking
it's just a
lots.
harder
And
piece
so
of...
what it is that little box you see there, which is
Is
this
that the very
element
big?
here,
Mhm.
is a 6-inch concrete pad reinforced.
Okay.
So when there's trucks back in there and start banging those things, you know, like at 5 o'clock in the morning, and the guy who's sleeping in this room here, can complain, it holds up
Okay.
with that. So you can still back
So
out of
so that's actually the same level?
It's
as
the
lot.
same surface as the asphalt, yes.
It's tougher. Okay. Let's see, you need final approval on the Applebee's, which I think, it sounds like you did all the recommendations, so
Yeah.
are people
Yes.
agreeable there? And do we want to have some time with the Holiday Inn plan?
That would be fine. I'm probably not gonna plant those again. I wanna get some of the trees around the perimeter probably before Thanksgiving in the ground.
Okay.
So it would be nice to know ahead of time. I'm not sure the availability of some of them. Hopefully they're pretty available.
Yeah, it's getting
I'm
late.
assuming that you're probably not gonna change this here, which is a continuation of what you recommended here. So if I have some of those to be ordered, I can.
Yeah, that's autumn blaze and RL.
I
is-
probably won't
Yeah.
get these
Yeah,
in
it's
here
nice.
because they'll be in the way of construction, we might damage them. I think I can put these in possibly yet this fall, so this would be a completed situation in the spring. And then probably won't do this one here since it's kind of in the way of our construction there. So there'll be a couple islands, other than this directly around the building. But those two we probably won't put in, but I'd like to get these in if possible.
Do you know where the nursery is? The nursery that you'd be getting them from?
No, I've been
It's not.
working with Rudy Baumgartel
Okay.
from the Alden Nursery.
Okay.
He's the one that's been working with me and stuff.
So we don't have to worry about the coming in from the south.
Uh,
Sometimes
I-
people get things in from the south, and they're not up to the rigors of
No,
this.
Rudy's been very helpful for us, and he'll be doing the landscaping on this, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least on our section. Now, I'm not sure about what's going on with Applebee's. They're competitively bidding that. I know
Oh.
Rudy's looking at it, a couple other local landscapers are bidding it.
Yeah, I'd heard that too.
What is happening right in the corner here with the trees that exist on the corner of the city's property?
The ones that are dead?
No, the ones that are alive down there. There are some live ones. I know there are some dead
I
ones.
have not been on the site recently to see which ones are affected. I think there's a pine there that looks pretty nice and pretty healthy. And then I think there may be a maple there also right in that area. I'm going by memory now. I'll look at those tomorrow and see where it's at. And try
I think
to-
the main concern was that you work with AEP to try and retain those, because it looks like AEP may be having to reroute cables for you at that point.
Well, we'll be interested to see what happens, because those root systems have been affected by the AEP lines that have been run through there. That basically looped down through here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they may have affected those trees, unfortunately, when they ran their line. Yeah. But the nice thing about it, we got rid of, or will be getting rid of, 4 power poles, which are cluttering the landscape down through there. So that'll be a
Good.
nice
Rare
little area.
accomplishment.
Let's hear it for underground line.
Well, we found out the cost of going underground compared to going overhead was $500 difference.
Ah.
You say that a bit louder.
Something we've
And of
been
course, that
wondering
is not a
about.
3-phase line there, it was a single phase, so that makes a difference also. But yeah, we had AP run the numbers both ways, and it was a no-brainer for us to get rid of those things.
Well, unless there are any objections, it sounds like the recommendations that Applebee's is in great shape, and we would like to have this for just a brief look over. We'll get it to our.
Should have
We
about
have
3
2 of them.
copies of it.
Yeah.
We-
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Sorry. Okay.
There's another one under here somewhere.
And that's the total picture package right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going
I'd
to.
like to have that.
Yes, please. Yeah.
This is another one.
And can we give the Applebee's plan to Steve for the code enforcement files?
We do it every week.
Yes.
Oh, we can rattle it on top of the mics some more.
Sorry, the filing urge is so strong. Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike Knoll. And we will get this results back to you on the hotel probably by Monday. We'll find a
Oh,
way to
that
make
should
it.
be more than adequate, because we're not going to have pavement in there probably for at least 2.5 weeks.
Ah, well,
So
give us more
in good shape.
meeting room. Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much. Dare we move this off the table so that we get our next pieces of paper?
Okay. Yeah, I think we're good for this. You lose your pen? You got your pen back?
No, it's missing.
Okay, our next, I have a quick summary of Bennigan's, and Steve Pearson might want to say something about it, but I think basically we can see that Bennigan's has pretty much completed its plantings.
Did you take
There-
your pen?
Thank you.
Well, the second item under the landscape ordinance is a summary of Bennigan's restaurant plantings, which had a difficult time happening and a very changing site over time. But the trees finally got in around the perimeter. There are 4 trees still missing. and they are trees that go on islands that interrupt long rows of parking someplace in the interior parking lot. I understand from the landscaper that he has ordered the 4 Zelkova and that the developer has paid for the 4 Zelkova that go in those traffic islands, and that this planting will occur in the spring when paving is made deeper. They'll simply cut out the asphalt and put these in. Steve, is there anything else to say on this?
I did meet with the owner of Bennigan's, Mr. Rick Rose, and explained to him how things had developed out there. One thing that I did do, and I think I might have copied you, Abby, on an email that I sent out to the staff, in particular the fire chief. The parking area as proposed is not the same as what exists. The fire chief would have been able to, without parking in front of the building, pull right up to the front door. What Mr. Rose did was he flipped some parking up against the front of the building, including handicap parking spaces. There are 2 rows of double-loaded parking, head-to-head parking, and then there's 1 row of single-loaded parking. So the site plan for traffic flow is completely different than what he had originally proposed. So the fire chief is going to go out there and look at it. So what you see out there now may not be the final product.
Preferably with a big fire truck.
The asphalt just went down 1 coat just to get the building open and get everybody out of the mud. You know, obviously, it's not a finished product. Watch those manholes if you go out there, because they're sticking up close to your oil pan if you have a lower car. But it could be striped differently, and I'm sure the fire chief will weigh in on that. If he doesn't mind the way it looks now, or if he wants it back the way it was originally proposed.
Who owns the trees along the roadway side? Have we decided whether they're going to belong to Bennigan's, or are they going to belong to the Hampton Inn?
Bennigan's planted them, the ones that are there.
Okay.
Right, and I believe in that same email, I may have talked about the continuation of the landscaping on each side of the drive up to the Hampton Inn, because the Hampton Inn essentially had committed to all of that up through there. I also had a recent discussion with representatives of Taco Bell, who will probably be building on the next lot over, and they had some questions about were they responsible for the access drive plantings, or was that going to be the Hampton Inn doing those plantings. They will probably, just so you know about Taco Bell too, more than likely they'll be in asking for a consolidation approval. And I ran that by the fire chief also, because the same reason Taco Bell is going to need a consolidation approval is the same reason the fire chief won't be able to get in the lot. With the parking spaces, interior spaces not adjacent to a perimeter, where a break every 10 cars maximum is required, you can't get a delivery truck in one way or the other, or a fire truck, without running over the island. So I'm not adverse to planting the tree, it's the island that's going to be a problem.
At Bennigan's, do we know why the river brakes are at the top of the bank rather than the bottom of the bank?
Probably my fault.
Ah, okay.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Well, not probably, quite definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, actually, by having them at the top there is probably a good definition for the parking lot, because somebody was talking about, cars kind of drifting over out of the lot over the hill.
That's the question I had. Is there going to be a curb there when it's all said and done? Around the parking lot?
It says so in the landscaping ordinance. There has to be a barrier of some sort to protect the trees.
Okay. I was thinking more of runoff and just definition of where you stop and start on a path.
And they have
Yeah,
serious runoff.
as Mr. Ingram pointed out, and I finally just got the parking blocks installed at Dollar General. It's only been several years getting those in, but that was one of the things that came up on that. The ordinance itself does require blocking or curbing of some type to prohibit vehicular encroachment into landscape areas. Now, is that a requirement of, say, to develop a parking lot? Well, not necessarily. The only thing you have to do on a parking lot is maintain, control your stormwater on site, not adversely impact your neighbor, essentially. So there are a lot of different ways to do that. Curbing is one of them. But because there's quite a bit of ditch drainage in that area between Bennigan's and the mall, and there's actually a large ditch and a catch basin, 2 catch basins, out in front adjacent to East State Street that were part of the widening project, that drainage will suffice to be sheet drainage. What we'll have to watch are those steep slopes. You'll start to get that rutting once the water finds the low point. So there may be some riprap that'll be needed, or maybe the installation of another catch basin so we don't have erosion on those steep slopes, especially out the street.
Do we know what he's going to plant on those steep slopes?
At the back, crown veg, probably.
On the front, there's grass now, but there are already some
Ruts,
little
yeah.
ditches forming from runoff.
And again, that's not the final product that's there right now. That's just something they want, they wanted to get everybody up out of the mud for the restaurant opening. So, yeah, that would be some extra consideration there. I think on the front slope, it was agreed by the tree commission that grass would be fine as a final product, because right across the street, there are grass on those slopes. It seems to be holding all right. The bigger question is the northwest slope against the drive to Bennigan's, and the rear north slope that no one realized, I don't think, by looking at the plans, how steep those were going to be. So I think those are going to be the 2 problem areas, getting something to actually establish itself in those 2 areas. And I think that probably is an item that was still open or under discussion, something other than grass to be planted on those
That
slopes.
list of plants that we had as ground covers was included in the recommendations for the things that hadn't happened yet. The 4 Zelkovas and the ground cover at the back. Mr. Rose might also be interested, might want to go and look at the shrubs that were put around the dumpster screen. Several of them look like they're either damaged or dying. So.
Okay. And this was, there was a lot of confusion. Albie and I met out there at the parking lot on a Friday in the rain to look at it. And then all of a sudden, trees just appeared, which made me feel a little more comfortable and a little less responsible for having to write a long letter about what needed to be done. I think Ms. Grigg went to the site too and actually did recommend that the sooner trees be placed in the ground, the better. Mr. Rose was almost too cooperative now that I look back. He essentially said, to your tree commission, here's a blank sheet of paper. You tell me what you want.
Yeah.
It seemed to be that he was not wanting to be too cooperative, in the sense it was almost like, I've got a blank check, just tell me what to fill in. So hopefully though we don't get in that situation again. I think we've learned our lesson. Had some communication back and forth I have with Albie about how to approach these kinds of things. And it's better because we had first thought we'd have Mr. Rose just submit his own plan. You show us something and the commission will review it. And he was just of a mind to say, well, you draw it for me and that's what I'll do. So we want to watch, I think, in the future. Rather than telling people what they ought to do, we ought to review their plans.
And the plans should be, the great grief of the landscaper was that he was working from this. He didn't know where to put plants. This is a map without sufficient detail. And so...
what he had was his site engineer drop some tree symbols on a site plan, and so that's all the further it ever got.
So that is just totally unacceptable. It has to be a serious plan with scale, indicated orientation, exits, entries.
And property lines.
Property lines, real property lines. Property line on this changed a couple times. The topography, it was just a fantasy.
I think that's another thing, too, we might want to watch, particularly given the Bennigan's example. If you don't have some proposed elevations on the site plan, if it's 2-dimensional instead of 3-dimensional, you really don't have a good idea how steep the slopes are, unless you actually go out and visit the site. And even at that, as Mr. Knoll was pointing out, what you go out and look at a site one day can completely change the next day.
And this will probably turn out to be pretty expensive in terms of mistakes for this gentleman, because the information was so insufficient for the landscaper that things were done wrong. and he's going to eventually have to pay for replacements or shoring up of terrible slopes with erosion problems and drainage problems. So this is, well,
One thing,
a lesson.
another good thing about the landscape ordinance too is it says that trees will live forever. They'll outlive us, they'll be replaced. So if they do have, problems, failures, deaths of trees, they'll all have to be replaced.
Yes.
It says, "The owner of landscaping required by this code shall maintain such landscaping in good condition."
Yes. So,
That's it.
yep, yep.
And so for this plan, presumably, we're going to have to take an inventory at some point as to what has been planted, so that something is in Steve's records.
Yeah, yeah. Because there ought to have been a plan, and there should have been something that landscaper could have followed.
And I think as the chair pointed out too, we essentially came to agreement a month or so ago that I would archive the plans at my office and attach them to all the building permits, zoning certificates, that kind of thing, rather than having them here at City Hall in a separate file. So when somebody goes back, hopefully then they can look at the most complete record possible with the code enforcement office and not have bits and pieces at different departments all over the city.
Yeah, thank you for that. You're well suited for handling those kinds of that format of material. Okay, our next item is University Estates, and we have a gentleman here with some information from University Estates. Fred, I'm sorry, your last name? Holmes.
My name is Fred Holmes. I'm with University Estates, and what we want to submit to the Tree Commission tonight is the landscape plan for High Point Village. This is our condominium. What we were specifically looking for is phase 1 of the condominium project. Can I bring the plans around?
Yeah.
Yes, please. Watch out for the microphones.
There is. It gets real noisy real quick with that.
Here is a typical building. Should start with someone. Altamont Drive coming around here. I think this second page will show. This part right here is going to be phase 1. This is what we're really submitting for tonight. This is the second part of phase 2. Here are your sidewalks. What's on the list matches what you're looking at there. And we are also using Moody Gartel from Albany Nursery. Here are the trees that he has outlined. I think he has them listed right here. So my understanding is of the process, you submit this, you review it, and then respond back to it.
That's correct.
We are scheduled for our preliminary PUD hearing on Thursday, the 19th of October. And as soon as we get that approved, we want to immediately submit for the final on High Point Village.
You mean 2 days from now?
Well, for the preliminary PUD is what we're submitting for 2 days from now.
So you won't have a final plat approval for a while?
No. Not for the whole project.
Are you indicating trees on these plans here?
Right here?
Yeah, it looks
Yes.
like this. Okay, what's the spacing between these trees here?
I think 30 feet is what he,
Good, okay, yeah. I couldn't tell from the scale of the drawing.
I believe so.
In that case, these must be quite close together.
Well,
What is the scale?
these are here's you got driveway, so I believe when I talked to Mr. Bombachero today, he said they were placed in the middle here between the driveways. There wasn't enough room to put additional trees in here. But here, as you see, as it's rounding the corner here.
If that's the scale down there, then that's 120 feet, I would say, based on a guess of what I can see there.
bit short.
Pretty close, about 100 feet, yeah.
It's going to be a problem in the stretch.
Yeah.
With that.
So it says these are all, this space is all driveway?
That's all driveway.
Wow, it's a lot of driveway.
How many spaces are you
Okay, so
thinking?
here's an example.
Yeah, here's an example right there.
Oh, so how many cars does this garage accommodate? Is that like a 4-car?
Must be a 4-car garage. I think you can tell right here, 1, 2, 3, 4.
A lot of paved area.
There's 3 bits in them, yeah. That's what I was thinking.
If the driveway is wide enough for entrances to each garage with pits
Well,
in between.
Yeah, I mean, if we've got something we can scale off with, but you could probably take a guess. I mean, how wide is each one of those?
They might see the cameras are still
You got a ruler.
Yeah.
You're always so prepared.
I don't.
Watch.
Okay, is there a scale on this thing? I don't see one.
1 inch equals 5 feet.
Oh, she got one.
What equals?
Way to go.
Oh, yeah, down there.
Yeah, 4 inches, 5 feet.
So this is,
What do we say? 14 inches?
I don't know. Hey, let's just move towards you. Let's get close.
Running into problems here.
Yeah.
Yes, just over 14 inches.
70 feet.
74 wide.
For 4 cars?
4 cars. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty wide.
Yeah. I think we're going to request some trees in the middle of that lot to break it up.
It's got to be more than 4 cars. That's,
4 doubles maybe.
Are these duplexes?
yeah. That would be close to 14.
Oh, of course they're duplexes. They're quad.
The 4 units in your driveway.
Oh, they're
Okay,
quads,
so-
okay.
So is it an 8-car garage? Is that what they are?
4 2-car garages.
It would make
Or
sense
2-car garage?
for that length.
Yeah, that would be about 2-car garages.
So is this a
Maybe
1-story?
3,
How
like
many
it could be
stories
3
is it?
2-car garages and 1-car garage.
Okay, 3 twos
See what
and
I'm
1.
saying? 1,
Yeah.
2, and then that's a shorter one. But
Okay.
I can confirm that for you.
So is this, well, how many stories in each of these buildings?
The 2-story, I believe. Is that right there? 2-story?
Buildings?
Yeah.
No, they're all slab on grade.
Oh,
There are 2-bedroom units and 3-bedroom units.
So the single story.
Right.
One floor plan.
Much appreciated as you get older.
Yes, I was just thinking that, the one floor plan.
Single bedroom, 2-car.
I don't. I mean, the landscape ordinance doesn't. Or the PED ordinance doesn't really deal very well with that one, does it? We're going to have to look at that and see. Now, in the PED ordinance, isn't there also provision for park areas as well? Is that, or am I thinking of a different ordinance?
No, in a subdivision, for every 50 lots, or once you get to 50 lots, you have to have a set-aside area for public use, which University Estates does. It's got, in the area of Phase 1, there's a 13-acre open space. That's essentially a buffer around the project in an area shared by all the residents. It's about 13 acres right now. There are no requirements in the PUD regulations if we're looking specifically at High Point. As a matter of fact, when you look at the ordinance, it simply says, the landscape ordinance says when you reach 12 or more units, you have to have a tree for every unit up until that point. And when it's 12 or more, the ordinance says you present a plan to the tree commission for review. A similarly phrased section of the PUD regulation says that if you propose a PUD, you simply present a plan to the Tree Commission for approval. So there are really no guidelines. I know in talking with Eric Brannon, who was looking at the site also, he came to the office and he said, I need the regulations on PUD plantings. Well, there aren't any. It just simply says, present a plan for approval by the Tree Commission. So,
Well, we're going
And
to
it's
have a
the same
look at
thing
that and
on
discuss it, I think.
subdivisions,
Yeah.
Because I can't
Yeah.
see how it's going to work at the moment.
part of what we're doing here procedurally too, we're, at the recommendation of Mayor Abel, University Estates is trying to do everything they can to expedite the PUD approval process, for, at least for High Point Village. So for final approval for a planned unit development, one of the requirements is a review by the Tree Commission for their plan. So what's being done now is some preliminary legwork that is required between preliminary and final approval by the Planning Commission for a PUD subsequent to its recommendation to council for review. So they're actually here at the recommendation of the mayor to try to get some of those final items out of the way in order to expedite the end date.
When is it expected to be at the Planning Commission for review?
There are 2 hearings or 2 meetings on University Estates this Thursday at 2:30 in this room.
Two meetings.
One is for the plat amendment, which is Phase 1 plat amendment. There are 3 lots being added to the residential subdivision, some realignment of University Estates Boulevard, and there's a reconfiguration of the commercial lots in Phase 1, actually to accommodate High Point Village. Altamont Drive has not been accepted as a location for a public road yet. That plat amendment, though, was submitted by University Estates probably 3 weeks ago to the Planning Commission. But that final review or final approval for an amended plat is one of the hearings. The second hearing is for, or the second part of the meeting is for an overall possible approval of preliminary for the entire site, the entire 856 acres. Then the Planning Commission wants each individual project, Grand Vista Village, High Point Village, any specific part of the 800-plus acre site to come in individually for either subdivision approval or PUD approval. So there are several things here tracking, a plat amendment and a preliminary review on a planned unit development, which will be one of quite a few that you'll see.
So when is the Planning Commission going to be considering or thinking of giving or considering final approval on the High Point Village, do you think?
It's really kind of hard to tell because the Planning Commission can require any other information they deem necessary depending on the site. And for final approval, there's a section that says if the Planning Commission needs some engineering feasibility studies and then there are any number of things which normally include stormwater detention, sediment erosion control, and restabilization of slopes. Sometimes those can take a little time.
And are they going to be asked for final approval at this meeting on Thursday?
No.
Okay.
No, there's the possibility of a preliminary approval, but it's not even a guarantee that preliminary approval will happen Thursday. Then you've got at least 2 more weeks before the next Planning Commission meeting for even the possibility of a final approval. And that's assuming there's no additional information the Planning Commission requires and that University Estates can produce all of the items that are required for a final submittal. In between, it takes a little bit more time too because there's a 20-day pre-notification of a public hearing. There's a public hearing that's involved between preliminary and final. So I have to have notice either in the newspaper or by mail to property owners within 500 feet of this project, at least 20 days in advance. And essentially that's an advertisement to the public in general also. The public notice is 15 days. I don't know why it's 15 days and adjacent property owners is 20, but you might as well just say there's essentially a month there ahead of time. You have to have an advertisement in the paper to give at least 20-day notice to the adjoining property owners. So we're talking, the public hearing couldn't even be held for another month and a half.
Yeah, okay. So in other words, we've got time between now and our next meeting to look at this thing and do some detailed work on
Right.
it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and even at that, there's just a recommendation that's forwarded from the Planning Commission to council, then council goes through their whole procedures for approval. And, as evidenced by some plan unit developments that have gone to council recently, that amount of time can be protracted also, just depending on what council might want to see, or whatever questions they may have of why the Planning Commission may or may not have recommended certain things.
Do you have any elevation views looking at these properties at all?
I saw some topo stuff here, but that doesn't give us much. Whoops, sorry.
No, what I was curious about was what they thought the front of this building would look like with its landscaping and trees around it. That's all. So sometimes those are.
And you mean-
those are helpful for us to envisage. I mean, at the moment,
In reference to the garage
I'm having great
entrance.
difficulty envisaging what they're actually getting to put in.
Hangar.
Yeah.
Rendering, artist rendering?
I could actually do it with an elevation, a front elevation of the thing. But if you've got an artist rendering of what it looks like, that'd be fine.
From the front.
From the front, yes. Yeah.
And maybe lines where the parking's going to be too would be
Yes.
helpful.
So some indication as to how the.
Because we're kind of having trouble visualizing
Yeah.
what's
and
going on.
it's so out of scale with what we're used to looking at that it's going to be very difficult for us to see what we're doing here.
Another thing I might want to mention too is the reason I don't have any other plans to show you, even though that area is in the city has not issued construction permits or zoning certificates for any of High Point Village. We are issuing, because there is a new road bond in place, we are issuing permits on the single-family residential homes. We've refused to accept any plans for High Point Village until it gets through the PUD process. So normally I would have elevation drawings to show you. The buildings are being constructed with inspections from the State Department of Construction Compliance. The plans are reviewed and approved by state plans reviewers, and state inspectors
So
are
wait a
there
second.
inspecting.
Does that mean these buildings
Already built.
are going up now? So we could actually
Yes,
see what.
three of them are up.
So we could actually see what they look like then.
Right.
Okay.
And I think they actually have a virtual tour at their website, which may have pictures on there too.
Okay.
But it's a little rough to get back in there now. It's just gravel. There's a lot of construction going on. Yes, this is not normally the procedure. We usually don't see buildings under construction prior to their approval. But this project, as most know, has been a little different than most.
Okay, well, we have time to review this, and we'll do it sometime before our next meeting.
And when is your next meeting?
It's going to be possibly the third week in November. We meet every third Tuesday, but we do have an issue here. We have an urban forester who has difficulty, has conflicts on the third Tuesday, third Wednesday, and the third Thursday of the month. And it would, we really need her at meetings if we can possibly do it. She's at other tree commission meetings in our 17-county area on those nights.
Well, the second Wednesdays that would work
So,
instead.
yeah, our next meeting, we're going to,
Past Thursdays, okay.
yes, this is something we have to decide whether we want to move to the first, second, or fourth Thursday.
Well, the fourth Thursday is
Doesn't-
guess what
I think that's the third Thursday.
No, it's the Thanksgiving is the fourth Thursday.
Oh, darn.
So I guess we
I
might be
was
talking
hoping to
about.
get out of doing that turkey, but I guess not.
Well, I
Okay,
want to thank
so-
you for accepting the plan, and I
Yeah.
will get you an artist rendering so that you have a better idea of what not only the front of the building, but probably also the back of the building looks also.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
And we will
you-
sort this out before the end of this meeting, but you will also be notified. We won't let you not.
And if you can leave one of your cards, we can make sure you get notified as to
Yes.
when the meeting is.
Certainly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry about the meeting confusion. We are in terrible need of the urban forester. So,
Second, the 9th, or the 16th.
all right. Well, we have, are there any other landscape issues, Steve, at this point? I didn't find anything else in the email while it was working.
Just one, I just mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. I'd sent a correction letter to Mike Pitcher whose company SiteQuest did the location project for the Alltel cell phone tower off East Park Drive. And there was the question about why the blue spruce were 3 feet tall when 6 feet was what was supposed to be planted. I did send a letter noting that and some other flood hazard issues and the size of the flag on the pole to Mr. Pitcher, who responded on August the 8th. And once I received that, I sent a copy of the letter that I sent back to Mr. Pitcher dated August 21st. His August 8th letter included a note from Stahl's Nursery, who provided his planting stock, that they just weren't able to get 6-foot spruce. 5 was the tallest that they normally had, and that was generally just at Christmas time. And he had asked if there were any other types of trees that the tree commission might want to, substitute for. And he called me today, and he said he hadn't heard anything back. He just wondered if he was still, would he plant 5-foot spruce, wait till he could get 6 foot? Was there a tree that you wanted to substitute? Because there were 14 trees
Yeah, and
that
there was
needed to be planted.
there wasn't a communication from Ann Bonner about this, and the names of several other wholesale nurseries were given that would have this stock. It's just an oddity that Stahl's does not have it.
All right.
So
In other words, the tree commission doesn't want to substitute another tree, just
we
plant
could.
what was.
I mean, Norway spruce, I think, would be another possibility, wouldn't they, for this site?
Yeah, I was thinking he was probably thinking more about a different type of tree.
I think we were wanting evergreens.
We want
weren't we?
evergreen
Because of the cycling.
You're trying to screen a cycling
Yes,
fence.
yes.
And there was also a concern for trying to keep with the theme, I don't know if it was a planned theme or not, that's going on down there right now along the bike path. There's some
Well,
similar
I
trees in
think
the area.
The sewage works has
Right.
a number of spruce planted along their perimeter, just across the footpath from them, and that was they're on the inside of their cyclone fence rather than the outside. But yeah, I mean, it should be possible to get blue spruces 6 foot tall. I mean, it's not.
Summerfield grows 5 to 6 foot
That-
Colorado spruce.
Yeah, Colorado's another one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it, Tupper's Plains?
Yeah,
So,
that was one of, Summerfield's, I'm pretty sure, was one of the places that Ann Bonner recommended that they try.
So it sounds like no substitution, stick with the 6 foot, is that what I'm hearing?
well, we
I
definitely want to stick
don't
with the
think it
6.
should be that hard to get them. I think he just needs to look beyond one nursery that says they don't have them.
Right.
You can send him some yellow pages.
Yeah, so Baumgartel, who's doing University Estates, is also a source.
I know Mike Knoll had mentioned that he would like to donate some plantings behind the water treatment lab in the baseball diamond up there off East Park Drive. And just so you know, Kevin Schwartzoff, the rec director, wanted Mr. Pitcher's phone number in case those trees that were there that would be removed, he might be able to get a good deal on them and place them in a park somewhere. So it's almost like right now out there, it's when it rains, it pours as far as how people want to donate
true.
plantings to the city. So try to
Indeed,
take as
indeed.
much advantage of that as we can.
Yeah. So we, seeing as Kevin is hovering in the air over those things, perhaps we could be a little more flexible. Yeah. So,
Well, I mean, I don't have any problems with him substituting another spruce.
yeah, it has to be a 6 foot evergreen.
It's the height that's
Six
the-
foot
Yeah.
spruce. I think, is the main
And
thing.
one that is relatively fast growing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a 6 foot tall, relatively fast growing evergreen of
We
some
don't
kind.
want pines that will have bare trunks
No,
before
you don't
too
want
long.
pines.
Right, we want
Spruce.
Part of this too evolved out of the Board of Zoning Appeals review of this particular site. That's a conditionally permitted use, and the ordinance, the zoning ordinance on that simply says screening will be provided, doesn't say what type. So the Board of Zoning Appeals has taken advantage of the expertise of the Tree Commission for their review. What type of screening do you want to see around this type of conditionally permitted use? And I think that's kind of how all this evolved too. I know the zoning board wanted to see almost an immediate screen. As a matter of fact, in one case, for a cell phone tower. Trying to remember how tall they wanted these trees to come in,
Yes.
20 footers or something.
Yes.
That
It's
you'd
true.
have to set with a crane, and the tree commission recommended that be revised, and that was. But in this case, I think this is a pretty good compromise, really, between, you know, a reasonable cost or expectation of successful planning and immediate screening as compared to what it'll look like eventually in a few years, so. I'll just let Mr. Pitcher know that, and I'll try to find that email too, if Ann sent something else out about other suppliers.
Yeah, should have been in there someplace. Summerfields, I remember the name. So,
Yeah, and all I know is at Christmas time, you can go out and cut or dig, right? And some of those trees are pretty big that I've looked at, so I think there's 6 footers out there. I'll just let him know.
thank you.
Before you go, Steve, I've got a question about, I think you mentioned that, is it General Dollar or out on East State Street are finishing up theirs. The bank next door to them, the trees there seem to be a lot shorter and a lot less than I thought they
Sparse,
would
isn't
be.
it?
I think we need to find the plan for that one and check that planting has actually been completed.
Okay, that's
Is that-
First National? First
I'm
National?
not sure which bank it is, but
That's First National, I think.
I think, you know, if you've got a copy of the plan, and we should check in any files we've got to see if we've got a copy of the plan. But to my mind, it just didn't seem to be as much as I thought it should be.
What I'll do tomorrow is, and here in the next few weeks, just take those files downstairs the tree commission's kept here at City Hall and take them back to my office and integrate them with the building plans. So I can look for that tomorrow too.
Okay,
I'll look for that as one of the first items as I'm going through that file.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, the next item of business is the landscape award, and I think that's a fairly short piece of business.
Right, well, the committee is nominating the bank on, is it Citizens Bank?
It is Citizens Bank of Logan, or Citizens Bank of Athens at 20 West Stimson.
20 West Stimson. They put in what, I did check with the plans, they put in what they said they were gonna put in. And in fact, there were a few more maybe. But at any rate, they did an excellent job. It's a nice variety. I always like variety of trees, variety of shrubs, and of small trees. And not only that, but they look good. They look pretty healthy, or very healthy, and it's been very attractive. It's been a real
looks good.
asset to the community because of the, and they also have perennials as well, and they had some annuals,
And
which
some
are very
annuals.
handsome, but they pretty much cover the bases plant-wise.
Okay.
Low on bright lights at the moment, but that's okay. That'll come.
Very good. Any discussion on the nomination? Well, we should, all those, sorry, it's past my bedtime. I'm having trouble carrying on here.
Do we need a vote? Is that
No,
what
we
you're-
don't need to vote.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think everybody agrees.
Okay.
It looks great. Yeah. We need, we'll have a presentation ceremony of sorts. The mayor said that he would be willing to do this at one of his mayor's press conferences, and we should have a certificate sometime next week. So I'll alert you all. And let's see. We need to notify the Century Bank president and Mr. Linder, who did it, I think.
Is it Century or Citizen?
I said Citizen, I'm sorry. Citizens Bank.
That
yes, Citizens
bank.
Bank. The one,
One last thing to know with you.
yes. Citizens Bank of Logan at 20 Stimson Avenue. Okay, thank you very much. If you give me some of the details,
Okay.
We'll get a press release out on them. There is a potential for some plantings. It might be a pretty slight potential. This is item number 5 here on the agenda. I knew I'd be asleep by now. And these are largely Court Street trees that have suffered that have suffered.
They're gone.
And
So,
gone, and gone. So here are some spots that really need trees. There is one spot that is not able to take a tree. Perhaps the most involved one is at 4042 North Court, where Blue Eagle and Interior Concepts, that should be plural, are located. The gentleman who is the owner of Interior Concepts really wants a tree there, is willing to pay for planting himself. So it's conceivable, given the mysteries of the budget, that that might be the only tree that gets planted here. But he would need some site recommendations at the very least, and there was an old site recommendation for that site of a Kentucky, that should be spelled like Kentucky likes it. Sorry, I can hardly read the print on the Macintosh, it's so small. So a Kentucky coffee tree, it was the past recommendation. If
It's a
The
good
other tree
recommendation.
that's survived well on there is the linden. Linden trees have
Yes.
survived
Yeah.
quite well.
It'd be nice to have a little
Street.
consistency too, if we could get a little harmony down there.
We're talking about consistency, but the silver linden is supposed to be a little tougher
Oh,
than the linden that we've been using,
okay.
and that would give some consistency.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
Yeah.
Well,
Does it have thorns?
No,
Oh,
just hawthorns, certain kind of hawthorns. and locusts.
just,
We think, I've
Good
sort of
question.
lost the thread here. Instead of the coffee tree, are we thinking about possibly the silver linden? Is that what you're saying?
If the gentleman is
Yeah.
going to be in the position of buying the tree himself, we might offer him a choice.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, I
that-
think
Yeah.
that would be
Good
good.
idea.
That'd be nice, yeah.
Those-
And the ginkgo is another tough tree.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right, that's,
That's,
Yeah,
true.
does okay uptown.
yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
fastigious,
As
okay,
long as
that'll
it's
give him a little
male.
name.
Yeah, as long as,
Yeah.
you get the
Yeah.
fruitless,
What was the count of the trees you
cloneless,
planted?
technically, variety.
Male.
They were
Yeah,
2
male,
inches.
nice, to see, yeah, dioecious, yeah.
And you recommend something bigger than that, where there's more possibility of vandalism.
Yeah, the bigger they are,
Yeah, the bigger they are, the higher up the branches are, the less attractive
Yeah.
I think they are to vandalism.
So you would see a 2-inch plus tree in a site like that, perhaps?
yeah, I'd say 2.5 inch trees.
Okay. All right, well,
What
we'll,
about 3 inches? 2.5 to 3 inch.
okay.
Redwood, just
Yeah, it's good to offer.
50-year-old redwood
Right.
grows in here.
Okay. Well, the other sites, if money comes back into the budget for trees, if money comes back into the budget at all, is, let's see, they are 18 North Court, the diner, which has the waist-high tree,
Yes.
which has, somebody wrestled it to the ground, perhaps, the top half.
Could-
Um,
It's sprouting still.
Could I
It is-
ask, is this number 2 tree in that spot, the one that's currently?
It's either number 2 or number 3, I'm not sure. Yeah, this is an interesting problem. 32 North Court, the CI bar, and you'll notice that I accidentally got really good survey information on that site. The back panel of beer trucks opens right over that space. I happened to be in the right place at the time the beer truck pulled in. So
Well, does that
they-
mean that we aren't going to be able to keep
I-
any tree in that space?
No, but that might be what happened to the last tree. I'm not
Okay.
sure what. So many things could happen on Court Street, but that was a panel I never saw open, and the guy was actually using it standing there. So, 85 North Court, Courtside Pizza. There is a space there. I talked to Mason Chambers, who planted the trees last time, and he said that that site really had power infrastructure too shallow to put a tree in, and that he ran into digging problems. The tree really would not have root ball space, and that probably should just be paved over.
And that would be any tree, not necessarily a smaller tree. Of course, when you get to smaller
Did you see
trees.
how shallow it was?
He didn't. It's been a year since.
If he said it was too shallow, I bet you it would be too shallow for anything.
What
Okay.
about a shrub?
Well, what's that gonna look like?
Well, I don't know, it might be better than,
The pavement,
Yeah, I mean,
Ground
the
cover.
other way you
Might
can
be
do it
better
is
than all
to
concrete.
put a box
A box
a
around?
crate. I mean, what do you
A
call it?
raised planter.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the sort of
It is a
thing
good
that we-
option.
Well, what about a planter that where the soil just is right on top of the soil over the pit?
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
okay,
but-
right,
but-
right.
But that's the only way to extend the sort of
Yeah.
viable region. But then you're stuck with the watering issue.
Yes,
You can't
and-
maintain water.
And I can tell you from a lot of experience on Court Street with planters, that is a giant ashtray and beer can collection site. A planter like that. And even a planter that high
So
high
if
up
it likes
on
an
poles.
acidic soil from the ashes, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a site maybe to, at 87 North Court, there was a tree planted there about a year ago. It was destroyed, and
Does that meant that it set itself on fire, or? Was that a fire tree?
it was burned. The
Self-immolation.
tree was burned and then taken out.
We need beware of the tree signs.
Right,
Yeah, they,
right.
right, pyromaniac tree, that's a pyromaniac.
Alfie just won't go along with the idea of trees with self-defense.
Are there trees out
Think,
there?
let's hear
Honey
it for a
locust.
locust. Right.
Big
Right.
spikes.
Yeah, big ones.
Yeah, but these are sites where they're empty, and it is a shame not to put trees back and to just give up. So I think it's worth going to beg for money to plant these. Let's see, that would be at least 3 trees, plus perhaps the contribution tree from the interior concepts. And there's another site where there was a tree that died, 86 West Union. There's a retaining wall that the city put in. And there were 2 trees planted there. I think Andy Stone was in the street department at that point. So it's 2004. It's on West Union, 86 West
Where the
Union.
retaining wall was down the hill.
Yeah. I passed one of these over to Ron, sorry. So that definitely is a better tree site than almost any of the others. And needs a new tree. And then in contemplation of, oh dear, the emerald ash borer.
Before we go to
Right,
that,
two
I have
No.
something about the trees that we've been talking about. We've been talking about these difficult sites, and Kentucky coffee tree, it's suddenly made me wonder, I don't know a lot about that tree, but it seems to be one that doesn't have as many branches, and the branches are heavier. Is this a tree that would
Take this
be
kind of
more
site.
resistant to vandalism and sites along Court Street possibly?
Because
I don't know.
it doesn't have,
Well,
The branches are a
it
little
doesn't have as
stronger.
many
Branched, yeah.
sparsely branched, and the branches seem to be larger branches. Maybe we should ask Ann about that.
Yeah, yeah, that might be a
But
possibility.
I'm wondering if that might be a better possibility for some of the most difficult sites. Unless I'm completely wrong about this
The other
idea.
thing that I think we're going to have to consider for some of these sites is the idea of protecting these trees with physical barriers
Right.
that stop people getting
Yeah.
so close to them. And I know it means more expense when you're planting them.
Yeah.
But
well, if we get something that can be put around it, and then later, once the tree gets really well established, could be removed and then used.
yeah. I mean, in those presentations that the chap from Cincinnati gave, he had photographs of trees that had these protective barriers around them.
Okay. Well, I bring these to you as suggestions, and we can decide on these in committee, but I think it would be nice to tell the gentleman at Interior Concepts, at the very
Yes,
least,
yes.
to
Yes,
go ahead and plan.
absolutely.
Yes, he's offering, sure.
Okay,
You
and
have
that these are the
suggestions for
suggestions. Okay.
Ron,
And we have, go ahead, sorry.
is this the idea of these tree barriers? Are you familiar
I
with what
thought that
we're
we had a
talking about?
few around one point.
Because it's something that perhaps you could research as a topic for future meetings. That what would it cost and where could we get it
Well, that's
from?
right, how
What?
practical is it?
Weren't there some gates, fences around the ones by the parking garage a couple of years ago? I thought there was, no?
Yes, there were.
They were made from rebar by
Oh, is that-
Tri-County Joint Vocational School.
Oh, is that what they were?
Under
Okay.
Loader Lampola years and years ago.
Yeah,
And they
I'm
rusted.
We discussed doing some tree screenings at some different areas, including that wastewater treatment plant spoil site, and also, we talked about it once upon a time before we removed the old rec center. So we do have some research out there.
Okay.
I think Ray Hazel's got some information too on, typically what I saw was 1/4 by 1.5" stock steel, bent to accommodate the trunk of the tree, then up with
Yeah,
a decorative
that's
curl
it.
on it.
Yeah.
With like a rebar ring on it, which you could make bigger or smaller. You know, we might even be able to make something like that in-house for really problem sites. I'm just thinking too, maybe recommending planting after Halloween.
Oh, absolutely. We always do.
Yeah, that's a rough time.
We want dormancy to be well established.
It's true.
There's a lot of things that go on in the evenings, especially on the weekends, but Halloween in particular, there isn't anything that's safe.
Right.
We'll be doing a Halloween walk around here next week. I mean, we're looking for things that aren't bolted down. Even some things bolted down.
Yeah,
So that is a really hard night
sure.
for everybody and everything on the street. Trash cans, trees, parking meters, light poles, traffic signals.
Dirty
Yeah.
It's a
Signs?
bad night.
Yeah.
So you're looking forward to it. Those things. Well,
The high point of your year.
very neat. Well, okay.
Okay, so do you have an estimate of price for this, or what? No idea what it's gonna end up to be?
No, I think, well, we can estimate about $400 a tree installed.
Okay.
That's a general ballpark figure. But they might be between $200 and $400, depending on what kind of
Tree and size.
tree.
But for these sort of trees, if we're going to spec these larger trees,
It'll be more,
it's typically more money.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you almost need
cheaper.
a larger tree.
Could we hold off paving over the empty spaces? I mean, I know
Courtyard.
they're not so
Yeah, I expect
beautiful.
nobody's going to do any paving in the winter.
Right, but you know, I mean, I just, because a solution may emerge, and I hate to, and I know
Yes.
concrete can be removed, but. you know,
Yeah, but it's harder, it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think
Somebody could probe down and see how deep it is.
Yeah.
true.
Or we could
Yeah.
talk with Mason.
Right,
Do you
right.
have-
Might be something
In
else.
terms of this spot here we're talking about, which is Courtside
Pizza?
Pizza, is that what it is, 85 North?
Yeah.
Does your GIS have any idea how far down the utility lines? You're saying that utility lines are the problem, right?
It was power, he said.
Power lines?
He
Do
came
you have
up-
any
Power.
information on how far they go down?
Not power.
Okay.
That's something,
Can you
well,
get
he
it
ran
from
into something.
AEP?
Possibly.
I bet you guys have a probe, a soil probe that you could,
Yeah, something
Physically.
conductive
You
probably.
know, we can determine depth of water and sewer as well.
No,
That might give us an idea, because there might be some conduit run through there.
no, yes.
Just to see what the limitations we have for that spot. It sounds like it's too shallow, but we don't know. And maybe I
Yeah.
thought
In
you
a lot of
asked.
cases, what will happen is when you run the power service in, to make sure that nobody does get ever tangled up in it, it's encased in concrete. So it may not be that there's just a piece of conduit or something like that.
Could be a concrete
There's a
pad.
concrete bottom, not very deep right there.
Might be it.
And generally, they paint it red, so if you're excavating and you dig up something red that's concrete, you know you're getting close to
Oh,
It's not a,
place where you shouldn't be. So I'm gonna guess that it's
Well,
a
that would,
complete concrete bottom.
that would affect any drainage on that site too, wouldn't it? So, even if there was enough soil, it would be probably a very good place to plant a tree.
It would be
It's right
like
here,
a
too,
plant
in the
box.
proximity of the big 5-foot storm tunnel.
yes,
So there's all kinds of things that.
I
just
know.
that far below the ground, you really don't.
That's a very busy.
That's a
It's
very
Freudian.
bad part of town up there. There are things that are just barely covered up. Street department's had a heck of a time getting brick back in on that street, keeping the elevation such that utilities aren't exposed. You still have approximately a 6-inch curb. And you have some kind of drainage consistency on the street. There's all kinds of concrete patches under that street.
Well, it looks terrific, no matter what's going on under there. I apologize for this. This is perhaps some kind of a Freudian slip. I jumped over item number 3 on the agenda, which is a serious item. This item brought in some, what are these leaves, Ron?
ash trees.
He's been cleaning leaves. Yeah. So the Emerald Ash Borer Management Program. And Ron is really the information person for the most part on this. We had a really super meeting on Monday with Ann Bonner and a fellow named Darren Cohen, who is an ILGARD person, and the mayor has arranged for an ILGARD student to enter data that will be collected in an inventories for the Emerald Ash Borer Management Program. And there, Ann and Darren and Ron came to some agreements on ways to proceed with doing the inventory. Ron, do you want to talk about that? Just come right up.
Yeah, as Ali was talking about, we do have a lot more information now in terms of how we want to proceed with this tree inventory. We do have access to the handheld computers, and Ann has given me one to take a look at and mess around with the software, but we don't necessarily all agree that that's the right way to go. We think that we should do paper maps provided by ILGARD, a grid system of the city, in conjunction with a paper spreadsheet for the volunteers that assist us doing the inventory, and create folders of each grid, go out and physically mark each tree on the map, identify it, put it onto a spreadsheet, insert it into the folder, and turn it into the data collector. That way we keep all of our inventory by grid and keep a hard copy record of it. Plus, we won't have the challenge of teaching everybody how to use the handheld computer. And the handheld computer doesn't have a map component, which is another downfall at this point that we're all in agreement on. Hawking College and OU have committed people to assist. Phil Cantino has 8 volunteers lined up to assist. I think Alvy was going to check on a Hawking College student, or was it another student?
Yes, we have possibility of a second-year student with dendrology who would be available during the winter break, and maybe a practicum student in the spring who would have 80 hours of work to do.
If we get all the volunteers lined up, we had some discussion about protocol for this inventory, and that included scheduled volunteer dates. If we're going to do this, we're going to have it scheduled, a rigid system, say Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. or something of that nature, so that we have some consistency. We're going to record on paper maps and spreadsheets. Each grid will be given to probably me at the end of the day, so that, or whoever, if I can't make it, whoever we decide will represent the group on the day of the inventory. But they'll be consistent. They'll be given to a consistent person, and that person will give them to ILGARD for data attribution into the GIS format. And ash trees will be the primary focus, and whatever we get in conjunction with the ash tree during the first pilot area is a bonus, but we want to focus on the ash trees at first. We're going to try to start this in December, first Saturday in December, and our goal is to have the east end done by the end of the year. East end defined by everything east of probably Madison Avenue. We're going to meet next Monday, the 23rd, at 9 a.m. to discuss the final spreadsheet form of the data that we want to collect during the pilot phase, and also to reinforce what we want to collect. If we do want to keep it focused on ash trees, or do we want to go further with it during the first walkthrough. We're going to try to finalize those things next Monday.
So this got a lot tidier once we got the street department and Ann Bonner and ILGARD.
Presumably when you say you're going to focus on the ash trees, you're still going to record the location of each tree.
I think
And
that'd be
perhaps
wise. I think
it's
even if we
species,
don't,
but only perhaps.
yeah, even if we don't have a person that is skilled in identifying the tree, we can at least plot a point and in the
And it
spreadsheet
would be
say
useful-
unknown tree and someone that has some
It'd be
expertise.
useful if we could get a
go
diameter
back, yeah.
as well of that tree.
Excuse me?
It'd be useful if we could record the diameter of the tree.
Right,
as
right.
well.
Yeah, if we could record all the information that we're typically recording for the ash tree,
Yeah.
for a tree that we might not know the identifying key,
Yeah.
I think we'd be ahead of the game,
Yes.
really, because
Yeah, I
we
think-
wouldn't have to double walk areas.
Well, what information are you recording for the ash tree?
We're going to finalize that next
Oh,
Monday.
okay.
Some basic information like caliper and height, but also some things like diameter of breast height, condition, and that's at the whim of the person that's inventorying the tree. So we have to make sure we do some type of coding for everything, and we're going to try to firm that up as we get closer to December. So I'll have more information on that later, or I'll keep in contact with you via email.
Because you'll need some sort of very simple rubric for judging the state of health of the tree.
Yeah, it's difficult in the
You know, it's
winter.
always difficult to do that. I mean, it's what some people think is slightly unhealthy, others may think is very unhealthy. But I mean, I'm sure Anne will be able to give you some guides as to what that should be.
Yes.
But I think I agree that the way to do it is to just concentrate on the ash trees, but if we can record
Right.
the presence of the other trees, but not worry about what they are.
Yeah, we're trying to find the line between too much information and not enough. We don't want to be too cumbersome that it is subject to a lot of error.
Now, presumably, the database that you create from this, we could have people go back in later who can identify those trees, and then we can add this information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
as we
That's
go in.
the plan.
Yeah, no need to obsess
Or the
about a tree
concept,
you
I
don't
should
know
say
the
plan.
species.
That's the concept.
Will you, with this setup, be able to definitely identify which trees are really on the right-of-way?
Yeah, we'll be able to identify the trees in the right of way.
Okay.
As well.
I know that is very different in different parts of town.
I like the confidence with which you said that, because there are some areas where it isn't easy.
Even if we do have some questionable areas, we can use the old tax plats and the rules that we generally use with right-of-way measuring to figure
Because
it out.
in fact, that is the most difficult part, I think, of the survey. I mean, saying there's a tree somewhere isn't too difficult. Saying where it is in relation to the adjacent property,
Right.
with some reliability, is the difficult part.
I think we have enough tools at our disposal and methods that we've used in past practice that we can be confident with our right-of-way.
One reason I've raised that question, I know on the survey that was done some years ago, they did not include a tree that was in our front yard. I mean, the right-of-way is well back toward our house, and I think they must have assumed that wasn't
Right.
city property. But-
And
that makes me wonder how many other trees were
well,
missed.
to say we won't run into problems would be
Optimistic.
would be a bad statement. We will miss trees, I'm sure, but
Presumably.
we have enough quality control, I think, with the people that are going to be volunteering and having an active tree commission that we can ask questions. We can say, hey, why didn't you include this tree? I know it's in the right of way. Well, we go out and get that tree.
Presumably, you'll be able to tell the volunteers how far back each of the right-of-way runs on each of the streets that they're going to be surveying. I mean, that's
Yeah, we'll use
because
this.
that is it's the usual problem in the Near East side, is that some streets like Morris have got a very wide right-of-way.
Yeah.
Some of the others have got narrow rights.
We'll use the overlay, the parcel map overlay, as a guideline for our right of way.
When you say grid system, how big a grid system are you
They're
talking?
going to be 1 inch equals 100 feet, I think, and they'll be printed out on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper.
Okay, so the volunteer would then be able to see fairly easily, because will
Yes.
the properties be, the actual houses be marked on the?
Yeah, we're going to have the house. We're going to have the ortho photograph.
On top of
okay.
it. Makes
Yeah,
much
and then
sense.
have
Okay.
the parcel layer on
Well,
top
then-
with the building addresses
Yeah.
on the map, so that
Okay.
we'll be able to see exactly where we are. And at a 1/100 scale on those ortho photos, you can see tree bases.
Yeah.
Well, that's just,
So
yeah,
we
I mean,
don't
you're
need
gonna
to
be able
do
to see the
GPS
trees
work.
then. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to do GPS work, since we can see the trees on the map.
What's the date of the author this year? These?
It's 2002 flyover,
Okay.
but again, with the mapping that we'll be using, you can get a close enough estimate, probably just as good as you would with a GPS unit,
Yeah.
based on referencing that point on the ortho photo. Well, it's at the northern corner of this house. Plot your point.
Okay, sounds good.
Was there any talk of tagging the trees that are observed with like little green paint
sort of a
spots or
blaze.
something?
Yeah, we did talk about that. One of the big challenges that we have when we do any type of mass inventory is intersections. Because you can locate, let's take for example, you want to locate the trees on Morris, but you also want to locate the trees on May. Well, if you have two different inventory collectors, they can identify everything on Morris, and then another person will identify everything on May. Well, the things that are in the intersection get double located. So we were thinking of having some type of system where we just spray a dot on the bark that signifies that we located it.
Sounds good.
At breast height.
3.5 feet.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Ron, anybody?
Okay.
Any other questions?
Sounds fun.
Yeah, this
Sounds
is
good.
suddenly coherence struck. you know?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good plan.
Okay.
Back to 6, is it?
Yeah, on to 6. Yes, and we will get through this, yes. Arbor Day, we have the planting of the tree in memory of Wayne Key, the dogwood that's going to be out at the community center. I spoke with Rudy Baumgartel today, who's doing the planting. And he says that he thinks that he'd get it in by the end of this week or perhaps by sometime next week. So it's getting hard to really pinpoint the date within these 2 weeks. We do have time for our Tree City application to have it occur on Friday, November 3rd, which would be well after all the Halloween celebrations.
The tree for Wayne is getting planted.
The train
Yeah.
dedicated,
Dedicated.
and celebrated as an Arbor Day tree. So that's the Friday that seems the safest to predict.
This community center, location-wise?
Community center, Mark, where did you?
Northwest corner.
Northwest corner.
Okay.
And we haven't set a time. That probably will have to be emailed or phoned around. I think the mayor had some ideas using, tying in with perhaps a children's program that's there at the community center.
Okay.
So I don't know what that time frame is, but it's probably afternoon, I would say.
So is that going to be near East State Street?
No, it's on the northwest corner of the community center of the building. The building.
Right next to the building.
The tree already there.
Okay.
It will be at
It
that.
will be. When is it planted? When will it be planted?
It's going to be planted either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week, or perhaps so. So we're having
Pretty
Arbor Day
soon.
on November 3rd. Soon, thank you. Yeah, and it's a Coosa dogwood constellation. Very nice, and it is a dogwood because that is the state tree of Wayne's home state, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, so it has nice resonance. So on trees in the law, there is a
Mockingbird Roundtable?
we have the possibility of attending a meeting in Parkersburg, which is on October 27th. I have some sign-up sheets here if people are interested. I would like to go. It's from 10 to 2:30. I think there's a $10 fee, and I have a registration link to for people who are interested. So if you're interested, let me know. And now I hope I really can find the next thing, which is a Ray. Yes, oh, here we go. Here's the Mid-Ohio Valley Roundtable for anybody who might be interested. Ray Hazlett has gotten a, gosh, what would you call it, clarification, a statement from Gary Hunter to clarify the problem of pruning tree limbs from city-owned trees, and this is something that came out of a property owner conflict of sorts that had to do with a tree that was over the roof. The property owner was cited for having to get the limb off the roof, was fined for some code violations, and this was part, no, he was not?
No fine.
No fine. Great drama ensued. It was, he was told, though, to remove the limb, and we, not having any money, simply gave him permission to prune, and he wanted it done by the city. So, the quote from Gary Hunter is, "If we specifically direct a property owner not to prune a tree in the right-of-way and damage occurs to private property or person as a result of limbs falling from the protected tree, we have assumed liability for the damage." This basically is the same response that Hazlett got several years ago from the city's liability insurance carrier. If the limbs from a city tree hang over the property line, right-of-way line, normal rule of law would apply, and the property owner has the right to trim the limbs off precisely at the property line, as would any neighbor in a similar situation. I would extrapolate this further to mean that we can't require a property owner to prune the limbs that extend over the right-of-way line into their property, but we can prune at the property line without their permission. So there you go. That's the official word on pruning and trees. Would you like a copy of this for your information?
I would,
You, yeah.
because basically I was contacted by Ray Hazlett to go ahead and take care of the situation.
Yes. Since it was took so long for this to happen, the law director had
And I
said
have
in
a
this.
copy of the property owner, and we started discussing
Okay.
the things.
So in this instance, the city is going to do it as an exceptional thing because it has taken so long.
We'll do this instance.
Yeah.
Exception to the norm.
But basically, trees are like sidewalks. There's a certain, you have to take care of them.
That wasn't what he just said it.
Well, no, you're.
You have to.
I got your
I'm sorry. I just,
The
you can
person has to put down the sidewalk and then take care of it.
the person has to, yes, has
Sweep
some
it,
responsibility there, has some
remove the snow,
responsibility.
Put in a new one.
Prune the tree,
Put it in the tree.
or not.
Has some
And
civic
the-
responsibility.
And the
He's going to lift
Right,
it.
thin and lift, very good.
Steve, you got
Or lift
something?
and thin.
Alvy,
So-
Steve wants to say something.
Kind of related to that same opinion. If one of you does go over to Parkersburg to attend that session, you might want to ask a question about, well, there's a city regulation that says if there is a tree, shrub, bush, vine overhanging the sidewalk, the property owner is responsible for trimming it back off the sidewalk. I've got a situation on the east side of town where we sent a notice to property owner, and they kind of took this and flipped it on its head and said, well, we're not allowed to do that. That bush is on the right-of-way, and without a permit from the tree commission, we're not allowed to touch that shrub. So my opinion from Gary Hunter would be that at the least, the city could go out, not demand that the property owner do it. The city could go out and cut that back. So
That
that's
has,
things hanging over the other direction. But again, it's kind of a contradictory section of the code. Which trumps the other? Property owner is responsible for keeping the sidewalk clear, yet the property owner is not allowed to cut anything without a permit.
yeah.
So
Beyond a certain,
it's hanging back this way
Size.
instead of this way.
but there was a size, wasn't there,
No.
over,
You're digging around in there, are you?
No. And again, I'm hoping that what this might eventually get to is if we get situations where we can identify a tree or a shrub that is overhanging the sidewalk, I can just get with Ron and say, can you guys go out and take care of this? If you give him blanket permission to go out and take care of it, rather than getting into situations with the property owners, especially as sensitive as some are
Yes.
to some related issues that it might be, well, there might be a lot more to it than just shrubs and bushes overhanging the sidewalk.
Are we talking about that side-on mower we're talking about for trimming?
Well, I'll trust that if you give Ron approval
People are
to
more than
take care
sensitive
of
about
it,
that.
he'll do a little better job than that.
It's really not what we consider pruning.
Oh, okay. This is asking.
Mutilation, mass murder.
Not lifting, pruning, that sort of.
We've made efforts to keep the sidearm off the trees.
That's right. Ron has actually reined that in entirely off trees, so.
The Shade Tree Commission ordinance just says no person shall plant, prune or move any tree or shrub on any public area of the city of Athens without obtaining permission. I mean, so in other words, I think what the law director has just said is that the city can go in and just prune.
And the one person in particular, or the situation in particular that I'm thinking about, they asked me for a rule of thumb. They said, well, what if I agree to go ahead and go out and trim this back off the sidewalk? Where should I cut it to? Should I cut it back behind the fence, right at the fence line, right at the sidewalk? And then they said, and how high do you want me to cut it up off the sidewalk? And I told them, well, I'd say a rule of thumb would be 8 feet. That's what the minimum clearance is, say for signs in the uptown area, walking down the sidewalk, at least an 8-foot clearance. So you're talking about, then they asked me too, do you have an inventory of things that are blocking the sidewalk, either vertically or horizontally, at 8 feet or right at the sidewalk? I mean, you can imagine how many places in town have that overhanging situation. It'd be a lot easier if we do have real problems. I can just get with Ron, explain it, and we don't have to deal with, necessarily deal with the property owner. Although, it sounds like from what Gary said, they have all the right in the world to go out there and maintain it too.
On their side of the of the property line, just as we have, or the city has on its side of the property line. It's the- I mean, I think what normally exists between two private owners exists between the city and an adjacent to private property owner. That, you know, there's this dividing line that goes up as high as you like.
Right.
But obviously, we would prefer people to prune back to the trunk of the tree and do it properly, rather than just stub cut at the,
Right.
at the
Shrubs seem to be a little hardier than trees if you aren't too gentle on the pruning, but again, that's just another, and I think it's good too, everybody's getting more of an awareness of what are things that belong to the public and what is the benefit not only to the public, but to the adjacent property owner also. Most people do want to cooperate. I don't want
Those are
to paint a
exceptions.
bad picture.
That raises another issue. That in the Columbus Dispatch on Sunday, there was an article about people insuring their trees, and I think the median or the mean value was something like $7,500 for trees, but they could go to 10. We've seen this with Anne and some of the data she's got, that the value of these trees to some property owners is tens of thousands of dollars, and you can now write an insurance policy on these trees. They are valuable.
So, yeah, if you do have them existing on your property, it's probably a good idea to think about something like that. If you get to go up to the University Estate site, that won't be what's going on up there. I mean, it's moonscape up there right now, so, you know, anything you can do to try to get a vision of what that might be in the future. I mean, it's pretty sparse. I mean, well, there isn't anything up there now. And hopefully I did a good job of explaining, too, why they were here early. Even though the situation's not been the greatest in the development process and agreement between the developer and the city, on the city side of it, we're trying to keep everything moving as best as it can. So, any work you can do on that would really be appreciated. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Well, we need to determine some meetings. The next meeting of the Tree Commission, and we, at some time, the third week of the month just seems to be a problem for Ann Bonner. And it's the evening meetings, I think, seem to be generally okay for all of us.
Yeah, well, we've managed to keep going for 2 hours when we couldn't have done that during the day.
No, it's true, and maybe we shouldn't have, but so.
But the 9th of November, which is the second Thursday, I think will be okay.
Yeah.
If that was a
Second Thursday? No mark?
I'm pretty much free on a lot of days.
Okay.
Wait a minute, so we're saying that the second
Second Thursday is not so hot if we, having the OU liaison is a good thing.
Right, it's really important. The third Thursday is
Doesn't work for Ann.
good. Doesn't work for me either.
That's what we're trying to get
And
away
then
from.
first Thursday
Right.
would work for me as
Yeah,
well.
the first
No,
Thursday.
that was third
Is that-
Tuesday.
Well,
Did you say all Thursdays or
Just
just
the
second Thursday.
just the second?
Well, how about, it wouldn't be that far away, but then we have some things to get moving on. So we could do the second Thursday, or Tuesday.
No, it's first.
sorry.
First.
First Thursday, which is November the 2nd, sorry. What?
Okay.
Paul?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
take a
So-
shot at it.
First Thursday.
That is the first Thursday, so put down Thursday, November 2nd.
7 o'clock here.
I'll be out of town, but that's not,
Okay. And we still have to clear this with the folks who have this room, but I imagine there's not really any Thursday night meetings, generally speaking.
Clerk council, just wanted to talk
Yeah.
to Debbie Walker about reserving the room. You never know, the personnel director might be doing testing, I mean, there's all,
It's 7 now.
clerk council's the one that controls it.
Yeah. Debbie's been super, but yeah, at 7 PM, surely not. Okay, and then that brings another meeting, perhaps before, definitely before that time, to review the university estates. We want to try to do this in a home setting.
That
Somebody's
seems to
house.
work well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a big table, and a weekend is also a possibility. So, how's about, let's see,
We haven't got too many weekends.
no, we don't have very many, do we? They're coming, there's even this weekend, there's a, let's see.
We don't really have the elevation, but you said, you thought their website?
He said the
There's a virtual
website
tour on it.
has a
That's what you
virtual
said, right?
tour.
Might be some information on the website.
Okay,
If you just type in University Estates, that's the first thing that comes up. Also over in my office, I've got what was the existing topography before they started, some early flyovers. It's not going to be much different
okay.
than that. At High Point, there wasn't a whole lot of earth disturbing activity. They basically just peeled everything off the top.
All the trees went with them, no doubt.
Yep.
Sure.
It's what used to be, just a few feet lower.
Were you wanting to set up a weekend time to do this?
If that's possible, let's see, and that doesn't really leave much. It's Halloween weekend or this coming weekend.
Well, I'm not going to be busy Halloween weekend, I can tell you
That's
that.
true. Probably none of us are going to the party, are we?
Well, I'm going out of town both weekends, but I should be back by Sunday night, which is when
Okay.
we usually
Yeah.
have those meetings.
Okay, Sunday night, the October 29th, daylight saving time ends. It says right here, I'm sure that the poor city crew knows that. So shall we say 7 PM at my house? Is that too late? That's 9 Old Peach. So, is there anything else?
I think we've covered enough
I
tonight.
think we
Yeah,
have.
well, welcome to Dave.
Oh, my God, yes. Yes, I apologize. Dave Sinkoff is our new alternate. The mayor moved the nomination to council, and
And
council
we
has
approved, yeah.
approved.
great.
And so Dave
Official.
Sinkoff is an
quick.
official member of the tree commission in an alternate position, and is the one person who actually can recognize just about any tree.
My variety skills are a little weak, but you're very good at that.
In the
Yeah.
northern hemisphere.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us.
No, this is neat.
Yes,
Okay.
and I think if there is nothing else, then we should adjourn.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
sorry about such a long
Have you
thing.
ever heard of the tree?
Do they-